Hello and welcome to Morning Java here on DKPittsburghSports.com. I'm Chris Carter here with Dale Lolley, and the bye week is over. It's time to talk Steelers-Jaguars in the playoffs. Dale, there's been a lot of talk about this rematch and who's ready for whom.
Yeah, and we'll see. Come Sunday, what this is all about. Whether that first game was an outlier, whether it's certainly whether it's the true basis of both of these teams. I think the Steelers feel like they beat themselves a lot in that game, and certainly Ben Roethlisberger turning the ball over 5 times that didn't help.
No, that had very little.
Very little to do with it. And I think they've kind of bristled a little bit about the narrative that's been put out there that the Jaguars dominated that football game. That was certainly didn't seem like the case at the time. The Steelers had more time of possession, more yards. Jaguars, before Leonard Fournette's final run, were averaging, he was averaging 3.4 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm.
Blake Bortles threw, 8 completions in the game, none in the second half.
Going into the third quarter, Fournette averaged less than 3 yards a carry. It was to the point where the Steelers were in defense, was controlling the game. I don't think the Jaguars offense had a touchdown before that Leonard Fournette run.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, they did.
They scored on a short field. It was like a 48-yard drive. But really, their offense didn't do a lot in that game. They did, early in the fourth quarter, churn out a time-consuming drive, and that one hurt. But overall, Jacksonville's offense didn't really hurt the Steelers, and they're not the type of offense. I think, if you only do one thing well, I think the Steelers can really shut that down. And when you look at this Jacksonville offense, Blake Bortles on passes of 20 or more yards down the field. We're only talking 20 yards.
Yeah.
12 of 45 this season.
Goodness.
Not great. And, the Steelers have had issues with the deep passes, but I don't see this team exploiting that.
We'll get into a little bit more of this matchup just in a sec. Now, before we get more into the matchups of the game, let's talk about what the Steelers have been talking about this week to you in the locker room and at the Rooney Sports Complex. One thing that I think everyone's talking about is that finally the Steelers look all healthy. Yeah,
for by and large, other than obviously Ryan Shazier being ready to go, they are as healthy as they've been probably all season. You look at this team heading into the playoffs, it's certainly the most healthy they've been going into a playoff game for certain. And you look at the teams that played last week in the opening round of the playoffs, pretty much everybody lost somebody, including the Jaguars, who lost middle linebacker Paul Plesney in that game.
Big piece to their defense.
It's a big piece, and he's just a 2-down linebacker at this point, but they already have trouble stopping the run, and he's their middle linebacker. I can't imagine it gets any better without him in there. So the Steelers are in good shape offensively. They get Antonio Brown back, which is huge. Defensively, yes, they're going to be missing Ryan Shazier, but they'll figure out some ways to kind of cover that up. And again, I don't know that this Jacksonville offense can exploit that consistently. Maybe they hit some runs here and there, but I just don't see them consistently running the ball against the Steelers. Fournette, to me, you look at what he's done his last 3 games, it's not been good. He's only averaging 2.6 yards a carry.
Against the Bills have the 29th best defense, basically one of the worst defenses against the run in the NFL, and they pretty much shut down Leonard Fournette. The biggest rusher for the Jaguars was Blake Bortles for 88 yards.
Here's the thing. In an NFL defense, if you only do one thing well, they can develop schemes to stop that. These are NFL players. These guys aren't, just people they're pulling in off the street. They've played a lot of football. They were all stars in college, and they can shut something down. That's why you want to be diverse. And I just don't think this Jacksonville offense is diverse enough to beat the Steelers.
Well, we're talking about the Jaguars offense, but the big talk should be about their defense, really. The defense, they were right behind the Steelers in sacks. They led the NFL for most of the season. Calais Campbell is having a stellar season. I think he leads the AFC in all sacks. But I think what everyone's going to be talking about is, can Ben Roethlisberger beat this secondary? You saw Jalen Ramsey had an interception to close out the game against the Bills. They had 5 interceptions of Ben Roethlisberger the last time. And Ben Roethlisberger, is there a sense that is this like a revenge game for him? Because Tomlin said we're not looking at a revenge game. We're just making this a game in the press conference today.
Mike can say that as much as he wants, but I guarantee you it's there for Ben Roethlisberger. And, the thing is, Jacksonville's defense is a bad matchup for anybody. They've got a good defensive front. They've got great cornerbacks they can cause you some problems. But as we saw last week against Buffalo, there were some times when Buffalo had receivers running open, specifically the tight ends, that Tyrod Taylor just missed them. And so, you look at this Jacksonville defense, people talk about the Steelers defense giving up the big plays. And yes, they did. They gave up 13 plays of 40 or more yards this season. Guess who? Jacksonville's right behind them with 12.
Wow.
So they
wouldn't have guessed that.
They will give up some big plays. Even though they only give up 170 passing yards a game, they can get beat. I think they trust these corners so much that they'll leave them on the island more so than you would a typical cornerback. And so at times, you're going to lose. We saw that happen. Jalen Ramsey got beat down the sideline by Antonio Brown in that first matchup for a 40-yard gain, 40-plus yard gain early in that game. So the Steelers can take advantage of that. The thing is, Ben Roethlisberger can't take the bait.
Right.
And when I say take the bait, when they're have everybody up at the line of scrimmage, that doesn't mean check out of your run play.
Right.
You still have to run the ball times. Don't be sucked into throwing the ball 55 times again.
Right, and that was a big mistake that the Steelers ran into. But also, let's consider this. There were also several times that Martavis Bryant was running with A.J. Bouye down the sideline, and Ben Roethlisberger at that point in the season really couldn't connect with him. If that factor's there along with Juju Smith-Schuster, now you have three receivers. Bouye and Ramsey can't cover all three. That gives that.
I like Juju Smith-Schuster against Aaron Colvin a lot.
That's the thing that I think that they're going to look at. They're going to find ways to spread those guys out. If the Jaguars want to run man for man with Bouye and Ramsey on the outside, pick apart, because you also have Vance McDonald now who's coming in healthy. I think those matchups favor the Steelers.
Absolutely.
And now it's time for What's in Your Cup, the segment where we take questions from you, the subscribers, and answer them here on the show. Today's question comes from Men of Pause, who asks, why didn't they run the ball more, Steelers that being, in the earlier matchup against the Jacksonville in the earlier part of the game?
Well, I think, Chris, we touched on that earlier in the show when I talked about Ben Roethlisberger taking the bait. He has, as most 15-year quarterbacks do, the ability to change the play at the line of scrimmage. In many of those instances, the Steelers had run plays called. And Ben Roethlisberger, when he looks outside and he sees Antonio Brown in one-on-one coverage, he looks to the other side, he sees Martavis Bryant one-on-one coverage, and he checks out of the run play because, history tells him and his knowledge of the game tells him, hey, this is a good time to take a shot down the field. Or I've got one-on-one coverage against Antonio Brown, I got to throw the ball here. They got a one-high safety look here. So that really played into it. I think the Steelers kind of changed things up after that. You saw the same thing in the Minnesota game. Minnesota was challenging the Steelers to throw the ball deep, and then they did it several times, and including once on 3 consecutive plays. They went 3 and out, chucking the ball deep every time, because that's what the Vikings were giving them. Hey, you want to try to beat us over the top? Go ahead. We think our corners can run with your receivers. So I think the key now is for the Steelers not to do that in this game. Don't take the bait, and they haven't taken the bait by and large over the second half of the season. Don't take the bait. Run the ball when you think you've got something there. If it's 1st and 10 and you run the ball and get 3 yards, 2nd and 7 certainly better than 2nd and 10.
It's certainly more manageable, and also don't take necessarily the deep shots. Have those sort of play actions where you're hitting them over the middle of the field. Force those linebackers to be responsible, especially if Puzzlezzi's not out there. You're going to force those linebackers. Do they fly up and help against that run? And does that gives the opportunity for those deep crossing patterns that you see that will be able to hit them beneath the safeties, but over the linebackers.
Yeah.
So thank you for the question. We are glad to answer all those. We'll be back later this week probably to talk about this game some more. But be sure to check us out, the Steelers Show on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast, because we'll be breaking down this matchup even further. From Dale Lolley and Chris Carter, thanks for watching. Be sure to leave your questions in the comments section if you want to be on What's in Your Cup.